Remember to subscribe and like. Yay! Good day, world. Welcome to Be in the Moment. Today, it is super exciting to be together again with Cres and our special guest, Zachary Weiner. Zachary is, as I like to say, an inventor of inventing things. And he has been persistent through the years here on the BSV blockchain, building businesses. So, Zachary, welcome to Be in the Moment with us. It's wonderful to see you there upon the lake.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Yes.
personally, I'm so excited to have this call. Like, I want to learn more how he do his business. Maybe something that we can copy, right? Yeah. So, Rory, yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Yes. Well, I recall I first saw Zach with his business VX Pass, and there had been a call from Jimmy Wynn during the pandemic saying, hey, what ways can we use the blockchain to solve problems during this critical time? And then we saw VX Pass emerge with solutions that were there to help people document their healthcare records. And so, Zach, first, I noticed you then. And since then, you have expanded this theme of the theme of transparency and privacy together in a solution built on the blockchain related to documentation so that people can have accessibility and utility to their own personal document information. And I've noticed most recently, you with your business partner, Justin, have expanded with Magic Dapps. Or is it Magic Dapp?
It's Magic Dapp, but
Okay.
Dapps is good too because you should be creating more of them.
Yeah, so please tell us about your passion for building.
Sure. So I've been a software engineer for longer than I care to admit. 20 years. But my personal story plays more into how I choose to apply the technology than my story becoming a developer. So for me in 2008, my family lost pretty much everything that we had, right? 2008 was a terrible time for most of the world. My family got hit really hard in 2007 by the types of investment failures that created the collapse that hurt everybody else. And in that time, we had invested pretty heavily with an organization, a company that they used our funds in ways that should never have been allowed based on our contract. Okay. So my mother, it still is, but at the time, was a widow. These investments were made for widows and retirees, people who live on fixed incomes. And the management company was able to use our money in an omnibus account, meaning like in mixed in with funds from other account holders, and took more risk with our money than was legally allowed based on the contract that we had signed. And so what that really meant to us was they used an instrument, an instrument called leverage to trade more money than they had in our name on our account. And that's really good when you're making money because you make more than you can with the amount you have invested. But it's really terrible when you lose money because you lose money at a much faster rate than if you had invested only the money that you owned. And so for me, my journey towards accountability sort of started there. We still have this lake house that I come and visit my mom at, but all of the other assets.
And you're there now.
Yeah, I'm here now. We don't really have internet at the lake, so I took a drive to have this conversation.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Happy to be here. But through that experience, I recognized that, had anybody had mechanisms to hold these organizations more accountable to what they had promised, then we would have been better off in the legal stance when they had done something wrong. Now we could take it all the way to the end case where smart contracts would manage the investments for you based on pre-written criteria so that nobody could put your money in places that you didn't agree to. But even more reasonably as a starting place, we could start with just documenting everything in a way where you could take it to court later, right? And that would be reasonable. And so when I saw, essentially what the blockchain had to offer in terms of immutability, stability, change management, and then further on, we saw things with Run where you could actually maybe update records and keep a full history of those updates, right? So a permanent audit history. I started to get very interested in this particular use of the blockchain. And, I'd love to use my mom as an example. She's retirement age. Sorry for this. She's retirement age, but she's very responsible. Except that if you give her a piece of paper that's important, she's probably going to put it in a place where she thinks she'll remember it. But when it comes time to use it, like she won't remember what that particular place was. So that was the catalyst kind of for VX Pass, which was we all had to carry around this stupid piece of paper that was new, right? Nobody had ever carried papers around in the US or most of the world before, right? There's maybe other cases with immigration and stuff, but for the most part, normalized, naturalized citizens didn't really have to carry around papers. And now all of a sudden you have new, more risky personal information on these cards because it's healthcare. It's not just your ID, it's your ID plus some medicine. And I really didn't want her to lose the card somewhere and have her identity in that way be compromised. And I saw that there were a lot of correlations to other types of healthcare, right? Where, we should probably have the ability to have our own records, but not have the ability for prying eyes to go and make decisions about who we are and what we are based on those records. We share them with trusted third parties like doctors who don't make those judgments based on your record set. And when we empower people to own their records rather than large data lakes that may be in a government or a private organization or maybe a semi public or private, the security around securing that information becomes very expensive. And so the blockchain started to tick off these things for me: accountability, immutability, lower cost. And it just made a ton of sense that with this new thing, this new COVID documentation, this would be a good place to start, since nobody had any, necessarily pre-built solutions for how we might go and solve this problem. And it impacted the entire globe, right? There were some countries that took a different stance, but for the most part, COVID and vaccinations impacted almost every country on Earth. So that was why we got started there. But I knew from the very beginning that COVID wasn't going to last forever, right? This wasn't a business that we were going to build where VX Pass was the only product and the thing that, went on to become used in everyday life. Because realistically in medicine, if there's a big problem, within 3, 4, maybe 5 years, there's a pill that really helps that problem, right? We've gotten to that stage of medicine. So I didn't necessarily believe VX Pass was the way to go. And I still really cared about these things like accountability that had affected my life. And so as we moved on from the VX Pass product, what I really wanted to do was stay in the space where people could create verifiable records later. And what we settled on with Magic Dapp was making it very easy for anybody to describe the record they would like to save. That might be a school describing a degree. That might be a club describing their president for the year. That might be, what other examples? That might be accountants that want to save, invoice information. There are great apps for that too on BSV, so I'm not trying to step on their toes there, but it is a use case that you could do. So with Magic Dapp, I sort of inverted the model where with VX Pass, we used a smart contract and everything had to be very, very structured from the very start. You followed our data structure and followed the rules to interact with that data structure. And as that sort of changed, as we developed Magic Dapp, we inverted the model so that you describe your data structure. We don't tell you how to use the blockchain at all. We just give you the tools to build without developing, right? Drag and drop tools to create a form, essentially, that meets your needs. And then when you save the form, it's already published and available, so that if you've given somebody permission to your app or your DApp, they can create an account and start filling out that form and saving it. So that could be a school admin that gives permission to a teacher to write grades to the blockchain, right? That could be a municipal center that gives permission to a librarian to write records for who has checked out a book, right? And on what date, so that, you know, late fees may come into play. We don't want to dictate how people use the blockchain anymore. We just want to give people the tools to create verifiable records that are meaningful to them. And that was sort of the whole path. And if I may, I've also taken some side projects to do, like Ask Happy with AI stuff, because I do believe that while they don't necessarily intersect so well today, eventually the future of AI will be training it on verifiable data sets. So I want to be able to bridge the gap when that time comes.
Wow, forward thinking. Yes. So with that AI accountability, I had just seen Joshua Hensley say this on his talk with the investors at the panel with Unbounded Capital. And it's that concept that, and even you said this in your Magic Dapp webinar that you gave from the Miami Citadel, that even though a record is there and maybe there's a typo on the record, or maybe the record is no longer the most updated information, the record remains. It's there on the blockchain. And then you can make a new record to update, so that later, as time goes by, people can go through and review all of the records on the blockchain. And I think this is very inspiring, because everyone makes mistakes, but if you have that record of persistence, that is so beautiful and meaningful over time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and thinking on issues evolves, right? So if you talk about putting like websites on the blockchain, for instance, if you were to put a website, that would be immutable. But maybe, you know, the story has changed. We've gotten more information about a story since the last publication, right? Instead of just rewriting the whole story and only getting the latest update, you'll now know how that changed in real time. So you can understand the evolution of the progress that exists. And I think, to me, if that's all written in plain text, I could hear how people might have a problem with it. But I want to live in a world where we're all more honest and truthful with each other, because there is less of this judgment based on, you know, who we are, where we come from, what we look like, and more about judging people based on their character, right? And if we can show who we've been for our whole lives, the things that we've been focused on, right? Before this call, you've seen me for 2 or 3 years, but really probably didn't have much of an idea about why I care about accountability. It's meaningful to understand the context when you're in a position to either learn from or interact with people who you respect, right? So if a website says that it's from 1992, there's really very few ways to go check that copyright. I mean, you could check the copyright, but you know, you kind of have to check the Google Wayback Machine and maybe see if there was like social posts that share links to this site way back in 1999 or 2003, you know, MySpace or early Facebook. But with the blockchain, and because like the whole website and each publish would be signed, you can just look for the earliest use of that signature key, and you find an answer in, you know, 2 seconds about when the earliest use of this domain or the earliest writings of this author really were. And so those things may not have a huge shaping in the accountability world. It does shape the way that you allow the information published through those channels to influence your own opinion. And that becomes meaningful in media in many different ways, right? So accountability is not really like a vertical specific issue. It's sort of a humanity specific issue across, like, horizontally across all verticals. And personally, you know, I would like to be able to trust more of the people that I listen to. I'd like to be able to know more of their story, verify more of the things they've said to me in order to get me to believe or trust what they're saying next. And it all starts with building tools that allow people to do that.
That's really cool. I first heard about VXPass through Dr. Catherine Lipoto.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really, I was really hooked with the idea that it will bring record to unrecorded. So I wrote an article about that actually on Medium, from the interview that a Bitcoin Association had with Dr. Catherine Lipoto. I just shared you the links on the private chat if you want to check that out. But I just really appreciate the idea that you want to mitigate the risk of fraudulent certificates and fraudulent record of medical records, for instance. Like, okay, as you speak about it, we all understand, the three of us understand everything that you've said. But for the non-technical perspective, right, for those audiences that has no idea or knowledge about blockchain, maybe we can simplify it. Like when you go to a hospital, you don't need to, or for example, let's take the example for COVID, right? And you cross border, and you don't have this vaccination card with you because it was lost somewhere, and you cannot really, it would be hard for you to get another copy of that from the government side, right? So what you have is this, like a validation on your phone with a VXPass application, and just you can just show it to the next border or next country, and it validates that you are vaccinated, and no one can say it is not true because it is verified and it was like put in there with the timestamp and everything, and they can see all the data if they want to or if they wish to, right? So this is something that really avoid the risk of having fraudulent documents. I'm also seeing a use case that wherein there are some places, remote places in the world that, they can provide a fabricated certificate of, medicine, and they can consider themselves as a doctor in that particular area, and now they start treating people because that person is believed to be a doctor because he has this certificate, right?
Yes.
But the risk, because it is not a real professional, the risk of that is huge. And for those people who are in that remote places, we're like consider, oh, it's true because it's stamped and it has the certificate. It's from this, medical school in US or so, Europe, whatever you want to call it. And now he's just so generous to come here and, help the people. But the risk, the health risk is huge. He can actually kill people or, put the health of people in the higher risk. So with this VX Pass, when you put the certification, okay, I graduated to this business school or to this medical school, you can validate that information and actually contact the university and then
Without
authenticate.
having to contact the university.
Yes, yes. So the information is there already, right? And if you really doubt, right, because you kind of, oh, it's new and we're scared because it's new. People are so scared when you introduce things to them. So if they want, they can contact, right? They can secondly verify it,
Absolutely.
and they can have the best result that they want. So the idea about VXPass is just really great, and congratulations for that.
Thank you. Yeah, we also see, Dr. Kathleen Photo has spoken about this as well. We see educational credentials being very important for two reasons. One that you mentioned is fraudulent for sure. But even more innocuous than that, in some places in the world, and I'm not going to discuss specifically where we've seen this, but it happens more places than we'd like to admit, where it's pretty commonplace for a father to name a son or the firstborn son with the same name, something junior, right?
Exactly.
Phil Smith Jr., Phil Smith Sr. In the places where in the world where I'm describing this, a son will take on the role of doctor in an existing practice with no medical background because their dad was a doctor. And this is problematic. Okay. So even if you called the school and said by name, did this doctor graduate? They might say yes, right? Unless you knew that you were talking about junior. Not to say that there's no way to do that on the blockchain, or that we could prevent all cases of that type of fraud, but it becomes very difficult when you can see the age of the record, right? If you know that somebody graduated in 1942 and it looks like a 30-year-old practicing, there's something very wrong there. So there are other ways to sort of infer valuable information once you can trust the information that you're ingesting, right? And I do want to make the secondary point that anybody can verify the information, but with VXPass, your name, your birth date, your social security number, your origin, your country of origin, those things are not stored on chain. Those are identification factors that you personally will not forget about yourself. You have them, you know them, they're assigned to you. So as long as you can furnish them to the validator, meaning like you type it into your profile that's saved locally on your phone, never in the cloud, never on the blockchain, we can get a valid result when we ask, is this record valid? But if somebody shows up without your name, without your with any one wrong piece of information, by like even a character, the verification will fail. So yes, they can. They just wanted to clarify, you can choose to share your information with people, but you don't have to. And if they search for your record without your permission, they can never prove that it was yours.
And I heard you touch on this in your talk at the workshop from the South Florida Citadel. You mentioned that you can store some detail in the signature that would not be hashed onto the blockchain. So could you explain that more visually to give me a better picture?
So I forgive me if this is a bad example, but or a bad analogy, okay, but I said it this way in a conversation earlier, so I'm just going to go with it. Imagine a sausage making machine, right? You put some stuff in at the top and you crank the hand crank and then a sausage pops out the other end.
I've seen So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Okay. So the signature process is like the sausage maker. All you can do is turn its handle, and when its handle turns, it does the exact same thing every single time. No matter how many times you turn the handle, the inner workings are going to do the exact same thing every single time. So in this example, if you put the exact same information in the top side of the sausage maker and you run the sausage maker, a sausage with the exact same shape and striations are going to come out the other end. And so you can think about the signature as being the sausage maker. So long as you always put the same information in the same order, exactly the same way, when you hand crank the signature mechanism, it will always spit out something that looks very different from the original state, but will always look the same in its final state. So if you run a signature for the name Zachary Weiner, you put it in Zachary first, Weiner second with the space between them. Every time you run it through that signature mechanism, it's going to spit out the same hash, the same gobbledygook, the same XYZ 123 capital CP. Which means that you can always verify that the input data was used to create the signature. However, unlike, let's say, encryption, which if you have a decryption key, you can go from the encrypted state back to the decrypted state, you can never do that with a signature. You can't ever go from a sausage back to whatever went into the sausage maker beforehand, right? Even if you rip the sausage open and try to pull apart all the pieces, you can never put it back the same. So that is an extra layer of security where what you're storing on chain can never be reverse engineered, right? You throw a little bit of randomness in there, it can never be reverse engineered. But so long as you, the record owner, know what randomness you used and have all the information that went into the top side of the meat grinder, when the function runs to verify it, it will always spit out the same thing on the other side. So the verifier doesn't actually necessarily need to verify each individual piece of data. What they're looking at is this sausage exactly identical to the sausage we were expecting? And if the answer is yes, then it's a valid record.
Delicious.
Yeah, go buy some homemade sausage. Support your local businesses.
Saucisson, right? Sausage rolls galore. Yeah, that's interesting. So thank you for the complete picture.
Sure. Hope that wasn't too graphic for some of the listeners in your audience.
No, that's great. So again, let me see if I'm understanding this. It's that the signature is that the little poem? Is that the seed phrase?
No. So the
Okay.
signature, your seed phrase is used to create as many private keys as you want.
Mm-hmm.
Your private key is used to sign data. And then when you sign is a coding function, right? It's a protocol. So you do the exact same steps every single time. And signing, the act of signing, allows somebody else to use uh, your address, right? So
Mm.
your seed creates the private key. You use the private key as the owner of the private key to do the signing. And then
Mm-hmm.
once you have a signed output, some signed bit of data, you can hand that bit of data, the signed bit, plus your public information, your address, the thing you're allowed to share with people, to the person who needs to verify. And the verify function takes an address and a signature and says, did this address sign this data? And if the answer is yes, then you know the signature came from whoever was the owner of that private key. Okay, so it's like owning a key to your house. You didn't share your key with anybody else. Nobody else made a copy. You make a copy. Somebody else puts the copy in the lock, right? That was the public one. They put the copy in the lock. They see that it turns. They know that you made that lock. They know that you have that door, that this is your home. That's
Mm.
probably a bad idea because we say not your key is not your coin isn't really true.
Right.
But in the crypto world, it's an analogy that people kind of understand.
Right. Neato. Well, we're always learning here. So if this seems very complex, don't worry that this is the infrastructure of the Web3 that is just uh, emerging now. So anything new or complex, it takes time to learn, and it's good to be curious about these things. Just like some people may want to become a mechanic, they need to learn these technical terms to be a good mechanic. So we are learning about these technical terms to be good builders and business people. So
Yeah,
thank you, Zach.
absolutely. And I do want to reiterate that, while understanding the terminology helps to better understand the actual technology, the tools that I've been building with Magic Dapp are meant so that you can actually learn as you go. I don't ask you to trust me. What I ask you to do is to trust that the system, Magic Dapp, will output data, store data, create records in a way that you can go check for yourself. So rather than needing to know everything in the beginning and like be able to walk the whole path without trying it and trust the words that I've said, what I really like people to do is to sign up for the beta and build a DApp for themselves. Save some information, click the button that says don't store this on chain, go check the transaction and see what's actually stored there. See for yourself that this stuff isn't stored on chain, right? The part that you said not to, and the one that checkbox that said please store this on chain showed up there. And as you learn, as you read more things about the blockchain or how it can be used or how data is stored, come back to the easy tools like Magic Dapp and try something new with it already. Don't go try to program something, out of from scratch. See if there are tools that are existing that you already understand. Everybody knows how to drag and drop something. Everybody knows how to type into a text box. So see if there are
Yes.
tools that already fit your skill set that can help you learn more by doing the same thing again, but with new knowledge and context. Right. So you're comfortable creating a DApp, saving a record for the first time, but you didn't know what a signature was. Now you know what a signature is. Go create another DApp, create another record, and go play with the signature a little bit. Right. Maybe not only, but reinforce the parts that you already understand by doing them again. And then it'll help you to like learn about this part that you didn't know if learning about it is something that you care about. Right. Again, I hate to keep bringing up my mom on this call, but she's retirement age. And when I build tech, I kind of keep her in mind, not to say that she would ever build dApps, but the
Mm-hmm.
application is easy enough that if she cared and wanted to and had a desire, she could. Now, she's not a
Perfect.
technologically savvy person, right? She uses her cell
Mm-hmm.
phone. I don't think she even has a laptop, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how easy I want to make things so that we're not excluding great ideas from people who don't have the technical base to understand how to build it, right? Because
Yes.
it's not just technologists who have great
Yeah.
ideas. Most of the
Mhm.
time, it's people who aren't technologists who have the
Right.
best
Yes.
ideas, and go find a technologist to help them build it.
Yes. Yes. Maybe just to help our audiences, we can consider digital signature as a one-way hash, right? Because some people, people keep on saying, "Oh, so what's the hash? What's the hash?" So a hash is also well known in the Web3 space, other than digital signature. Because in our ecosystem, in the VSV ecosystem, we use digital signature instead of hash, right? So just for our audiences, you can digital signature is also one way of calling a hash. So hash is basically a combination of alphanumeric combination of keys, wherein you can use that to validate if the data is correct and true. And actually, in our ecosystem, you can check that on Watson chain maybe to see the actual transaction happened. So, this is something that you can try at home, so you can see as well how to do it like live. Some people will learn more when they do it in action. So those are just some terminologies that maybe can help our audience. I just have a question for you, Zach. I'm so interested to know about this. I know how it works in the ecosystem, but just in your perspective as a builder, right? How do you balance the need for user privacy and data protection with a desire for transparency and immutability on the BSV blockchain? This is something really weird, right? Your privacy of data, but then transparency. So yeah.
So there are a couple of things that I think apply to this. So the first one is just like a vivid visual analogy, which is on a blockchain that has a data flow that's more analogous to like, so on BTC, because it's a small block, you could think of that as something like a garden hose, right? It's got a small front end, it lets a little bit of water out. And BSV is like a fire hydrant. It's got a really big hose, and if you open the fire hydrant, it might knock you on your butt, right? So if you're one drop inside of what's coming out of the garden hose, it might be easier to see that one drop of colored green water that has the food dye in it. But if it's coming out of a fire hose, right, it's going to be much more difficult to find that one drop of green water just in the amount of volume that's spewing out. So by using a bigger blockchain and by more data being there, it becomes harder for anybody to collect all of the data. Right, so on BTC, the whole blockchain is on every single Raspberry Pi, right? I mean, they can configure it to not do that, but for the most part, default settings, the whole blockchain is on every single Raspberry Pi. So every single person who participates in the blockchain has a copy of your data. And there's such few data bits there that it's a little bit easier to find inferences between correlated data. Because the person trying to find the correlation doesn't need the correlation to exist necessarily for them to find it, because there's only so many 7 transactions a second. Almost a human can sift through that list and try to find like eyeball correlations. So on a big data blockchain, just the fact that there's so much other information coming to the blockchain makes all of the information more difficult to index, right? So you hear people talk about run or ordinals, right? We're indexing this information so that we could take a subset of what's stored on the blockchain, a small portion of what's reasonable to us or valuable to us, ordinals, run tokens, something like that, and leaving all of the other blockchain data on the blockchain, not in our database. So, first things first is by choosing a big block and big data blockchain, it is just naturally more difficult to sift through all of the information to find small data points. Number 2 is the way that blockchain itself, from BTC to Ethereum to Solana to BSV, interacts with data, allows us tools in those technology packages, the libraries that we use to write the code to get these things to talk to the network. They give us tools to, the word I would use is obfuscate, but hide some of the information. In the case where we're talking about medical records, most people don't realize that once your medical record is created, if the doctor, hospital, or medical care provider removes your personal information, they can give away those records to research facilities, private drug companies, whatever the case is. They call it scrubbing your data, right? So as soon as that information can no longer be associated with you, it's kind of theirs to sell. Rather than going through that process of taking your personal information out, the blockchain let us start from an almost anonymous place. So it gave us a head start relative to how data structures and databases work today, and made it really easy for me to think about how we could keep some data off chain, the stuff that's super important to you that identifies you, but that you will never forget, and then use a signature to verify that later, but it still allow things like the lot number, the date of your injection, the site of your injection to be used in plain text on chain, so that if there was, let's say, an adverse reaction that was stemming from one lot of a vaccination, it would be easily identifiable. But even when you found those records, right, all of the records that came with this lot number, you could never go back and find the names of those people the records were written for. So in this scenario, we've used the blockchain for what it's best at, which is obfuscating information, hiding it, not necessarily making it impossible to find, but hiding it really, really, really well. And then in other cases, just not putting that data in a place that's public at all, right? So your healthcare system spends a ton of money protecting their records so that your private information doesn't leak. If you work for a big employer, they do that stuff too. But if you just don't save in any cloud function, database, loggable record, these types of data, your name, the important stuff, it becomes way more difficult for anybody to ever get access to it unless they have access to you and your person in particular. So it makes it easy for you to give somebody permission, but very difficult, almost impossible for somebody to access it without your permission. And we've done some very, I will call them rudimentary steps that allow for this sort of mechanism to work. But as smart contracts become smarter or more widely accepted and used, we'll actually be able to hide this information better and sort of lock it away rather than just hiding it and putting a sheet up in front of it. Which means, at some point in the future, you may choose to store your name on the blockchain in some super highly encrypted way. I don't know, that's your preference. But in today's market, the blockchain itself gives us the sheets and the veils that we need to protect our own data. And if we use it to the fullest extent that it's been made available to us, these things kind of become easy and make sense in the steps and processes that you take. But until people understand these tools that have been given to us by the blockchain itself, it seems like magic, right? And it seems like the words that I say are sort of impossible or must cost a lot of money. But the financial tool of blockchain, of Bitcoin, is already protected by much of the same mechanisms that we would like to see our own personal information protected by. So that's the starting point for us. And that's how we've taken a look at focusing on security of personal information relative to VXPass and medical, which is far more important than probably anything you're going to save in Magic Dapp. But the same type of rules for protecting the data apply to both, which is you get to decide what's saved on chain. You don't put your personally identifiable information on chain, and we create a signature out of it that you can use later to prove what went onto the chain to create that signature.
That's really awesome. Just want to quickly put things in summary, everything that you've said. So you are sort of saying that blockchain mitigates the risk of selling the information of the user to the dark web, because basically they cannot.
Well, I don't want to say that I said that, but I'm saying if you put your records on chain in a way that does not include even encrypted versions of your personal information, you're far more protected from that type of attack than in a system that even encrypts your name and your birth date. Because maybe one day somebody figures out how to decrypt it. Maybe there's AI supercomputers that just break decryption.
Quantum, maybe.
Right. So if you just don't save it there, they could never find it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Okay, last thing before, because this
Yes,
conversation is really, for me, it's really hot. Okay,
it
so
is.
this thing. So you just mentioned that you don't want to say that it will hinder that instance to happen. So now I just want to ask you, because on BSV blockchain we can actually put the actual file on chain, unlike on the other blockchains, right? That they just put the hash on it. So that is something that I can see that is an edge of the Bitcoin SV. But also maybe there are some people that they don't want to put their actual file on it. For example, that land title, for example, right? Because of the future risk. So this is it will all go to the appetite of the user. What do you want to do? Do you want to put the file on chain, or you just want to put the hash on chain? Because we have so many applications available, right, to do that. Is that what you're saying? Can we agree with
I
that?
totally agree with that statement 100%. That is how we approach building software. That's how I'd like other people to approach building software if I was giving them advice. And we think it's, I think it's in the best, how'd you phrase this? In the best interest of the BSV blockchain for people to have options for how much they would like to save, right? Because everybody has their own internal fear levels or thresholds for fear.
Yeah, risk
And the
appetite.
Exactly, risk appetite. And the tools shouldn't demand what your risk appetite needs to be. We should start at the lowest amount of risk, right? The people who are the most fearful should still have tools that they can try, even in spite of all the things they're scared of. So
Yes.
one where they don't have to type their name in at all, right? One where
Mhm.
they don't have to send their email anywhere to sign up for a place, where they can just go to a website and type something into a text box and click a button, and whatever was in that text box gets saved to the blockchain, right? And that's like the lowest level of introduction to saving data on chain. It's a little difficult to do because you would have to set something up to pay for that transaction. My company has built tools that allow our company to pay for our users' transactions. So Magic Dapp users don't have to go buy BSV anywhere. I'm sure you guys know probably better than your audience. It's kind of difficult to buy BSV today. So it's much better for my business to have a stash and for us to pay for those records to get written. And if you write lots of records, for you to pay us in fiat the way that you would pay any other business bill, right? That fits into your billing cycle and other mechanisms. And if you,
Convenience.
yeah, and if you would like to use BSV or really any other crypto to pay for this, just send us an email, right? We'll figure out an address for you to send to, and we'll bill you that way. But for me, I think the majority of the people in the world want to be billed in fiat, and especially if they're not super crypto enthusiasts now, crypto blockchain enthusiasts now, and they're just stepping their toe into the water for what they're going to start to save, right? We should make it as easy as possible for them. And if they have fiat, if they have crypto, if they just want a free trial for the first 2 or 3 saves are free, that's what that means to me, as literally as easy as possible.
Seamless. Okay, I'll be quiet for
Yes,
now.
and you're fabulous. Thanks, y'all. Now, I have many thoughts that have come to mind. The first one is, as myself personally, and even let's say some of the people that might be from the place where if your father was a doctor, then you are a doctor. There could be wisdom of the indigenous people that they've passed down generation to generation. And so in that case, that would be valid in if he was practicing or she was practicing some traditional medicine like Native American herbs, that you know to use because you learned through your family. In that case, they would be a doctor. So while we have the records, the verifying records, also it could be open to various cultures. It could be used by everyone. I know that in my case, I would drink hot water when I had the flu. That's my cure all. Drink more hot water and have a good rest. This is something I learned in China. And in China, they have traditional Chinese medicine, and they have official doctors there and official traditional Chinese medicine schools. And I even did go to a traditional Chinese medicine doctor that happened to be from Germany, and he was a student there in China, and he gave me such a great service, a great healing through deep tissue massage, and he gave others even more through acupuncture. So I'm saying we can use this VX Pass in creative ways. It doesn't just have to all go into one monolithic
So
Western
I think
medicine.
what you're describing here, if I may just bring it back to the big word technical stuff and talk over an audience again. What you're really talking about here is a credentialing authority. So in the United
Yes.
States, right, there's a medical association. Each state has one. They have the authority to write the credential. In the case of, let's say, a holistic healer, right,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably not going to be a government that's the credentialing authority. It's probably going to be some private organization like you've described that's been doing this for a long time. And they have the permissions from within their community, from within their organization, to say that this holistic healer has completed what we expect them to know for them to go outside of these walls and heal other people. It's the same type of record. It can be verified in the same way, but we are not in the business of telling you who has the authority to write a record. If there is the need for a credential authority, we're going to set up that credential authority and hand the authority the keys to do that, or give them the mechanisms to create their own keys and set it up so that they don't have to share them with us. That's actually probably the better way to go. It's more secure, but not everybody's willing to do that yet.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. That even though we're focused on one use case, there could be many use cases, even within healthcare records,
and
in
the
a
truth
variety
is,
of cultures.
I live in a state right now where technically a barber should have a license to be able to use a straight edge razor on my beard. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a stylist, you don't necessarily need the same license, but you're legally not allowed to use a razor on somebody's skin. That there's a credentialing authority for barbers who write
Mm-hmm.
the barber cert, right? So, medical is a very, very highly regarded certification, but it's also one that has a tremendous impact on the people who go to see the practitioners. If I go to a barber and I get a bad haircut, it's probably not the worst thing. But if I go to a barber that didn't know how to use the razor and he's shaving me right here and cuts my artery, that's probably a pretty bad thing, right?
Oh no, I gotta ring the bell, okay? Oh no. Now, also talking about privacy and transparency, I would like to bring up the white paper. And again, this is something that Brittany Bitts and Jerry David Chan and I really honed in on during our conversations, was that in section 10 of the Bitcoin white paper, you can see the structure for this privacy within transparency. So anyone that's interested, just go look at that section 10.
That was a really good call out.
Thank you. Yes. So,
and you had the paper printed. I love that. That was phenomenal.
Yeah, I think this was a gift.
I'm jealous.
CoinGeek London 2020. So against all odds, I went, and they gave us a little pack, and this was in it. So
You just gave me an idea,
Thank
Rory.
you.
Maybe something
What's
that we
that?
can have at the London Blockchain conference. Are you coming, Zach?
Justin will be going to the London Blockchain conference for us 100%. I'm trying to work it out for me as well.
Woohoo! Yeah, just go for it. I think it's going to be fantastic, and they need all of us homies there. You know, all of us, we interact together and know each other, and I think it's so important for as many of us as possible to just be there if we can, find a way, and then that way we can lend to the good vibes of the experience. There will be so many people there, and so often some networking events can be quite stuffy or serious, and we need to be welcoming and say, hi, welcome, who are you, and bring people together,
Yeah.
So that's my wish, for as many folks as possible to be there.
And I agree. There are some things that just would never happen over a Zoom meeting, that just organically happen when you're in person, standing next to somebody, and the conversation can just go where it goes.
Right. And that brings us to the South Florida Citadel. So Zach, tell us about that. You've been there, and you're always so welcoming. You know,
Thank you.
I love that about you. You know, there was someone that I knew that was going to Florida. I said, please, can he go visit you there? And you were welcoming. And I thought, oh, thank goodness. I'm so glad you have this welcoming culture there. So yeah, what is that like being at the Bitcoin Citadel?
You know, it's exhilarating in some ways. I think we need to give credit to Kurt for having the vision. Kurt, a number of years back, saw a different meetup turn into sort of a co-working space that gave the room and the space for the people who cared to come together and ideate in ways that increased the speed and velocity to market for all of them. So, you know, it wasn't necessarily that they built businesses with each other, but just by being next to people who might have had the same problems on the same blockchain, you didn't have to spend 3 days finding a solution. Somebody could just like airdrop you a piece of code that worked. And because it was so collaborative in that way, not necessarily on their individual projects, but at least to getting to market, what ended up happening was the meetup became a successful incubator and co-working space. Kurt saw that happen, and it's been his dream to do that for the BSV community. I think since probably 2018. I saw him start speaking about it in 2019, so it had to be earlier than that. And it took a long time, specifically with COVID. You know, as COVID hit, it was early 2020. That was around the same time as BSV's Genesis block, or back to Genesis rather.
Right.
And so it was difficult to get commercial real estate. People were locked up in contracts and, you know, had taken out loans for the government, from the government, to pay for these contracts, but didn't have people in the buildings. So, you know, commercial real estate lender or commercial real estate property managers didn't know if they were going to be up for rent or not. And so Kurt dealt with so much administrative work to get this done. We were supposed to move in about 4 months before we actually did, because of some EPA things that had literally nothing to do with Kurt's ability to build, but just for the government's ability to sign off on it. But now that it exists, you know, with myself and Kurt, and especially Luke, I think gets a shout out and a lot of credit. That's Wild Satchmo on Twitter. His name is Luke Rones, who lives around the corner. We now have a place where we can have those conversations that we were just describing London Blockchain Conference having, but we have them regularly, right? So I found myself just kind of talking about the implications of one type of data structure storage that gave Luke a different idea about how to make things a little bit easier that he was working on. It was totally unrelated, right? But just because we were there to have that conversation, something else that he couldn't stop thinking about that was still going on in his brain while we were having the conversation took in some of our new information, and he had to like go and do it right then. Like it just immediately got done. So, you know, while I would like to say that it was all about community, because we are very, very welcoming, we want to make it as close to all about community as possible. Some of that community development is actually also business development and library development, infrastructure development. And so I think, you know, for people who have been working remote for a really long time, I was a software engineer that was remote before COVID. And especially because the BSV community is so small in the grand scheme of like crypto communities, but also just general communities, right? Like moms is probably 3 billion people across the world, you know, at least 2 billion people. People
What's
who
moms?
like just people, the community of people who are mothers.
Oh,
right? It literally includes like 2 billion people across the world.
I'm thinking
I
about
thought it
the
was an
mom technology
acronym.
AI of Google, like the
Oh,
MUM.
no, I'm just
I'm
saying, you know,
overthinking here, you know?
you make a community group of mothers and you're guaranteed to get thousands of people who are interested, because there's just such a big community of people who are actually mothers. With BSV, the community is tiny, so finding the people is hard enough, but then getting them in the same physical space without a known like flagship place was, you know, people say herding cats. I think it was more difficult than that, because if cats like you, they'll just follow along. But it it has become a nexus for ideas, for collaboration, for work, but also for fun. So like at least twice a month we have social meetups. We play bingo out of there Thursday nights, every Thursday. And so, I'd like to
Bingo.
just talk about the things that were built out of there, including ordinals, which is probably the most exciting. But to me, the community is the most interesting, exciting, and exhilarating part.
Thank you.
And please come to anybody in the audience, whether you're a BSV proponent, somebody who's on the fence and wants to learn more, somebody who really hates BSV and just wants to yell at me, come on down. Like, yell at me in public. Let's have a shouting match, right? Let's hash it out.
Were you saying something, Cres?
No, I'm just laughing hard here. So I need to put myself on mute. Like you technically invite people that that can freely shout.
The truth is, I believe that all of our differences sort of become much smaller when we meet each other in person.
Mm-hmm.
When you're behind, when you can't feel the person's energy and vibe and intention in real time. Because even on these, things, there's like a second delay in here. There's some context that's missed. We're human, like interacting with humans face to face in person. That exchange of energy and ideas is important to understanding the other person. And so when you come from a position of misunderstanding to begin with, right, they're mad at me or angry or want to yell, it's much easier to get past that miscommunication or misunderstanding if you're yelling at my face.
It's just like a friend's, like you are in a crowd, like a very noisy place, that you're talking like friendly talk, but you're yelling at each other, something like that. So yeah, I think that would be a good example for that. Congratulations to your Citadel, and at the end of the day, it all goes down to to your relationship to people.
Yeah,
because the users are people. So if you don't do communicating or building relationships with people, then you will not building relationship with users. So that's a very good
and I think that's one of the reasons
ecosystem.
Why Kurt did this, right? Because he'll always tell you, this is not me being mean about it. He's not a developer, right? He understands technology very well, but he's not a coder. So, for Kurt, his contribution could not have been code or necessarily an application that was written by his team, right? For him, the most meaningful contribution was creating the place where the minds could come together. And so there's so much more value that can be provided than just code.
That I heard is from Brett Banfi, and it took me some time really to digest it, because I think that's really cool saying. He said, can't see the forest for the trees, right? So the forest not just consists of trees. So there are really some other forms or organism or living things that can contribute, not only the trees. And so me personally, I graduated as a computer programmer. I used to code before, but I used to find myself working at the administrative office or human resource business development because I'm a woman. Simply like that. That's how it goes here in the Philippines. But I'm always in between of the working closely with the developers. And so when blockchain introduced to me, I was like, there's something in your blood that brings back that fire that you really want to do it again. And so I started digging deeper, understand it in depth, until I find to happen be involved in the core team at the Bitcoin Association, which is I'm very thankful. um I just want to quickly give shout out to Patrick Prince, the former managing director of the Bitcoin Association, who actually introduced the blockchain to me. And from then on, I was like addicted to it because it's really different. It's like it's not the crypto item that I used to understand about Bitcoin, right? So it's really different, and it's really depth in the technology and solving real world use cases. So going back with the tree, so this is my participation. I'm not the coder. I can feel Kurt in that sense, but I can translate these technical items, technical terminologies into non-technical language. So then we can bridge the gap from non-technical learners, but they want to use the blockchain technology and understand it. but they cannot relate to the very technical terminologies that is being used in this space. So that's how I started doing this.
Incredibly important, right? And I'm sure that if we were to just even think about like one of the projects, and I don't want to show for anybody else's projects because I'm trying to make my own money here, but if we
Yes. What's your website?
Go on.
magicdapp.io, askhappy.com, and we'll just leave those two for now because those are commercial. But no matter what the project is, if you care about it, right, if it seems interesting to you, call up that team and say, you know, what do you guys need? Like, what are you lacking? Right? Because startups are usually built of small teams of people that try to figure out ways to fill in the gaps of what they're missing. And, you know, I've said this to multiple people who have like really created roles for themselves on my team. Just because you come on as something doesn't mean that's what you need to be forever. If you find some element that's exciting and you can add value, go do that thing and then tell us how you added value, and that'll become your responsibility set. We may shift you off of your old responsibilities. We may add responsibilities. Maybe you get a promotion. Maybe we help train you in some ways for skills that you need to be better at progressing in that new career plan. It doesn't matter. But there are so many things to get done at these projects that almost none of them are well staffed enough to take care of all of it. So if you have something to offer, you like the program, the idea, the product, whatever, reach out to the team. Be proactive, see if they need help. And more often than not, even if they don't have something for you right then, the next time they have a problem that they need to solve that they don't have resources to solve, they know who to go to, right? So, you know, there's no reason to be shy in this really small network right now.
Yes.
You know, as Rory said, we as individuals, I think on this call and generally in the greater community of people that Rory's had access to are very accepting people. Like, we want you to come into this world to understand this technology that we understand other people call a scam, right? Like, I don't blame you for that it might be a scam because you've read it in some place. Just don't be shy. Like, it's not sticking your neck out to offer help or support or ask for paid work even.
Yeah.
Yes.
On a project.
Well, allow me to do so. Okay. So let me tell you, Zach, I have so many skills, and I started my business and I thought, well, they need developers, so I'll use my recruiting skill. But the truth is, they don't necessarily need recruiters. We need more investors, right? So then I think, well, maybe I can do social media or marketing skills. I have all these skills, but I don't have my own personal business plan. So I am sticking my neck out to say that, but I'm willing to keep improving. And I would love to spend all of my time, 100% of my, working time focused on BSV blockchain ecosystem. And that is the target of my business, Talented Development Firm. But I go with my hunches and I learn and grow. So do please let me know if you have any suggestions for me.
Straight up. What you just described to me are the skills of a community manager. Somebody who understands people, to empathize with people, to be sympathetic to what they're going through, and make them feel included in the community. To do proactive outreach, right? So, and we do need a community manager. So let's take this offline.
Thank you, Zach. All right. High five.
Yeah, that sounds so amazing. We literally need everyone in the space with all the talents, right? We have the hard coder, but you know, in these years of working with the developers from different parts of the globe, I have developers in India, I have developers in Europe, in Germany, and some in US. And I'm telling you guys, if the CEO is the developer, I'm telling you, they are having hard time to market their product.
And sell the product, right? So
yeah.
most important things that we never talk about as crypto businesses because they're supposed to go viral. But on BSV, if we're really going to be an enterprise blockchain, the way businesses buy is through enterprise relationship development. That's sales, and it is a skill. It's a hard skill. We need more.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
that's so true. So we keep on promoting, collecting, and collaborating with different content creators in the ecosystem, to let them know that the BSV ecosystem is not as small as they imagine. This is the experience that I had when I started talking to different content creators, as you know, Rory, right? They thought that the ecosystem is very small, and I was just like, okay, you go to bitcoinsv.com slash projects, right? It's ecosystem slash project, and you will see tons of projects of BSB. And that person was like, oh my god, I thought there were just few. There are tons of projects in the BSB ecosystem. It's just that most of the CEOs and founders doesn't have their own social media accounts. So
Yeah.
basically, people know something when it is on social media. But if it's not on social media, then it do not exist at all. Maybe in that particular area, yes. Maybe some friends and family, yes. But if you want to go international, whether you like it or not, to admit it, social media is a powerful tool, right?
Yeah.
And most of these people, very talented in the hard coding, but they do not know how to put that in the market to
It's
have
actually
funding, right?
a
And to sell.
personality where if somebody is good at being a developer, has the qualities of literally being able to sit and focus on a computer screen for 8 hours a day while solving these mathematical puzzles, so to speak,
Mhm.
you find that they're not prone to use hyperbole in their own language when they're describing what they're doing, right? And
Yeah.
they describe what they're doing very technically because they want people to understand like the nuance of what's being done. That makes for shit marketing. Excuse my language. It makes for terrible marketing, right? Those technical details, most people don't care about them, and then when they hear them, they actually turn off. It does the opposite of marketing. So oftentimes it takes somebody who is not the technologist, who is not, who doesn't get like internally confused, or like their stomach gets upset when somebody says something that's slightly off, right? Because it wasn't technically correct enough. And marketing is never those things, right? Like
Mhm.
when you hear a drug being marketed on a commercial on the TV, right? The technical part about it always comes really quick at the end, right? You almost
Yeah.
turn it, all that
Like
tech,
3 seconds.
it turns the opposite of making you attracted to this product or service. And
Yes.
so marketing is one of those things that we need desperately. It's a
Yes.
skill, right? And it's one that you can learn. But if you're a technologist that's used to literally having to describe every single detail to somebody who's helping you build a tool, that experience for you is detrimental when you try to move and put your marketing hat on, right?
Yes.
And the same thing is true in the sales economy. It's almost detrimental to you at top level sales before you get into those technical sales conversations. So people with those skills who can take really technical words and make them into understandable phrases by humans is almost invaluable. And then the people who could take those non-technical words that still describe the technology and convince other people to give it a shot. Like now you've got the full circle, right? You've got the people who can,
Exactly.
the people who can translate it to the people who will buy it, and then the people who will buy it and then buy more. And any one of
Exactly.
missing tripod legs, the you know what I mean, the seat is
Mhm. Yes. And
Yes.
everyone needs tenacity. That developer is nonstop persistent in solving the problem and building. And that takes great strength and persistence and devotion. And likewise with sales, that pushback that you face and overcoming objections and learning and adapting, that also takes tenacity.
Yeah.
So I feel excited because we have this in BSV. There's so
Mhm.
many people here building in the ecosystem that we have everything we need. It's just all about meeting and knowing, oh, you have this skill, I have that skill. Let's go, let's do, let's
Yeah.
build.
Let's do it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
It
I
takes
did,
coordinating the right
sorry, sorry.
it takes coordination of the correct resource.
Yes,
Just having
Right.
exactly.
isn't good enough. You have to have the right chess pieces on the right places in the board in order to win the game.
Yes.
Right. Right.
And we have Castleborn that Ray at Kitty Treats on Twitter, she's a developer and also a community builder. She introduced me to Adam Page, and I interviewed him here on Be in the Moment. And he taught us about this virtual world that he had created. It started out as a co-working space online for people that are remote workers to be present with each other through a telepresence, and then be available to riff on ideas or ask questions, maybe swap code, as you said, Zach. And it ended up being a space where a lot of people in BSV went and they played games and they built NFTs and NFT marketplaces within the
And
world.
Bandle.
Pardon?
Bandle the floor with Cres was here.
Right, and vandals like Cres. Decorating the
that.
houses, right? The real estate. So
Yeah.
we started the open mic night, and it's a great meeting for everyone in BSV to come and play. The similar aspect of meet new people and play and share art and music, and then also talk technology and what your projects you're working on. So through that, we had the idea, as you were having your meetup, let's have a watch party for you in Miami. So that's something we'd love to do going forward. If one of your friends there on site in Miami can simply just log into castleborn.com and hold their phone up, then we can watch you live. Or if you're already live streaming your presentations at the South Florida Citadel, then we can just all gather in Castleborn and live stream it and then talk to each other while we're watching you.
That's really cool. So we've used Castleborn a few times for the not commercial stuff that I do, the social club. I'm a big fan of it. I really like the idea of simultaneous. It's not rebroadcast, right? It'll be a simulcast. What we do in the Citadel on Castleborn, and I don't have the authority to make that commitment to you right now, but I can tell you that I don't really need the authority to put it on the screen. So until somebody tells me to stop, we're just gonna do it.
Oh, yay! Thank you.
You can also share the link to us at the Bitcoin Association, so we can support whatever events that you have in Florida, right? We can start sharing it in our channels, or maybe in my personal account personally. So this is the idea. We want to really empower all the people that has this initiative to put themselves online and spread awareness to people that we exist. And this is the projects of the BSV. This is the BSV projects. These are the people who are working on it. Like, we are the people who really hustle with all the challenges and with the success as well. We're going to celebrate it all together.
Thank you for all of the inspiration and information, Zach. It's a joy to be with you, and Cres as well. You can really make the connections and break it down so that I can better understand as well. So thank you both for all of the time being in the moment together today. And remember, folks, to subscribe and like the channel. Be in the moment. And we look forward to being together in the moment again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Please
Thank you
like
so much.
and subscribe. Bye. See you in the next one.